What's going on, guys? Paul Masetta here, back with another video for you. And in today's video, what I want to talk about is how you can become a relatable authority when you communicate with other people. So again, my name is Paul Masetta, and I am a researcher in the field of human communication. So if you like learning about how human beings interact with each other, specifically through verbal and nonverbal communication, then go ahead and consider subscribing to the channel. So why is this concept of being a relatable authority important? Well, if you're a coach, consultant, author, expert, thought leader, teacher, somebody who leads and inspires other people by helping them improve their lives in some way, whether that's to solve a problem or fulfill a desire, you need and should be seen as an authority. Authority is a very powerful weapon of influence. In fact, in his best-selling book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, written over 40 years ago, Dr. Robert Cialdini identifies these weapons of influence, and one of them is authority. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole educational aspect about the power of authority. I have lots of other videos on that topic. I'll put links to the description if you want to watch them. But in short, what the law of authority tells us is that people are more likely to listen to, pay attention to, respect, and comply with those that are perceived as authorities. So if you are an authority in your field, people are more likely to pay attention to you, listen to you, follow you, and most importantly, comply with what you ask of them. But I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm going to say that I believe being a relatable authority is that much more important. I'm going to jump into a short training, and I'm going to show you why. So first of all, when somebody interacts with you for the first time, whether that's through a video like this, through a podcast, through a marketing campaign, through an interview, whatever it might be, there are 4 questions that you essentially want to answer for those people if your intention is to get them to listen, follow, and comply with you. So the first one is, who are you? So this is where you want to establish your credibility and your expertise as it relates to the problem that you solve or the desire that you fulfill. So I want to be clear about that. This is not where you tell your life story and give people every little detail of your life, because here's the truth. People don't really care about every aspect of your life. What they care about are the aspects of your life as they pertain to solving their problems or fulfilling their desires. So that's where you want to establish your credibility and your expertise. Then you want to talk about what qualifies you. So you want to showcase your relevant experience and achievements. Then you want to answer the question of, why should I trust and listen to you now? So a lot of people say that the answer to the question is, why should I trust you and listen to you? And that's good, but better is, why should I trust and listen to you now? Because people care about the relevance and the timeliness of information. Like, we're moving at a pace right now in terms of technology where information is becoming obsolete and it's becoming replaced, especially with the introduction of AI. So information that might have been new, valuable, and relevant today might not be tomorrow. And so it's important to tick that box of, why should I listen to you now? And then the last one, which is a not so obvious one. See, I see a lot of people who teach credibility and authority in marketing. They talk about these first 3 questions. Who are you? What qualifies you? And why should I trust and listen to you? But very few of them talk about the third one, which is not a surface level question. So this is not a question that your audience is going to consciously ask themselves. They're going to subconsciously ask themselves, how are you like me? And so here you want to find common ground and show that you understand their perspective and that you are like them. You know, I think it was Tony Robbins, and I think he might have got it from his mentor, Jim Rohn, that said, people buy from people that they like and people that they want to be like. And so becoming relatable usually solves both of those problems. So here's what I could tell you in 20 years of studying human nature and in working with dozens of business owners in one-on-one and group coaching settings. I've learned a few things about what people secretly desire and what they want, especially in the context of coming to you for help for something. So the first thing is they want to be led by somebody that they can relate to and trust. Like, yes, if the problem you're solving is big enough and urgent enough and you're the only one that could solve it, you don't necessarily have to be somebody that they could relate to. And maybe in all aspects, you're not somebody that they have to trust, but they definitely have to trust that you could solve the problem for them. But it's always better to be somebody that they can relate to, because let's face it, people really don't want to comply with people that they can't relate to and that they don't like. And if they only have to do it because you're the only person that can solve the problem, then they kind of feel forced into it, and that's never good. The second thing is that people need self-assurance. Like, they want to know that not only like what you have to offer works, but that it works for them. You see, a lot of people get caught up in articulating and demonstrating their point of view and like why their process is better than everyone else's or why their approach is better than everyone else's. And they might have like a laundry list of testimonials and case studies and reviews from other people that have had success with their approach. But your prospects deep down inside, they're still wondering, will it work for me? Yeah, it worked for all these other people and it worked for you, but will it work for me? And as the relatable authority, you have to showcase your expertise, your experience, while also demonstrating how you understand their perspective, because this builds the validation that they seek, assuring them that they can achieve the desired outcome. Again, when I say people want to be led and they want self-assurance, lots of times really all people want is permission. They want somebody that they believe knows more than them about a specific thing to give them permission to do something. And that's fine, because if you could change somebody's life just by giving them permission, who cares? At the end of the day, you changed their life, you got them a result, you positively impacted them in one way or another. Lots of times they just, again, they want self-assurance. They want to know that they're thinking the right thing, that they're contemplating the right thing, that they're making the right move. And so you need to be able to demonstrate that you understand their perspective in order for that to happen. So now what I want to share with you are 14 ways to be relatable. Now again, part of the reason why this is important is I want you to think about like what makes Superman so great. Well, it's because he's also Clark Kent. And what makes Spider-Man so great is that he's also Peter Parker. And so what that human side shows is that they are vulnerable, normal, and relatable. You see, lots of times I see people get caught up in this process of trying to be the all-knowing wizard on the mountain, the person that has all their shit together, that never does anything wrong, that lives the perfect life, that is all-knowing and wise, that never makes mistakes, that knows everything there is to know about their particular topic. They're never wrong, they're a genius, and they are the top authority and expert that people come to for help with a specific problem. And like I said, you should be the top authority and expert, and you should have tons of credibility. But realize that when you present yourself as so perfect, and you present yourself only as Superman and never as Clark Kent, what happens is you're not relatable. And so your prospects start to say to themselves, well, yeah, well, that it worked for you because you're smarter than I am. You're more intelligent than I am. You're more educated than I am. You're more persistent than I am. You have a better work ethic than I do. You came from a better upbringing than I did. You never had to deal with the challenges that I've had to deal with. And so, again, when you present yourself as almost too perfect, you become unrelatable. And when you're not relatable, your prospects begin to think that your way of solving problems can work for you and it could work for other people, but it might not work for them. And secondly, being relatable is always better than not being relatable. So, 14 ways to be relatable. Number one, I believe this is probably the most important one, is to share personal stories. But more than just personal stories, like what you should share is what your challenges were, what kind of a shift you experienced in life as it pertains to the challenge, and then how you overcame the challenge. That is storytelling 101. That is like superhero 101. Because what that does is it gives you the opportunity to showcase your expertise and your knowledge, but it also paints that picture of humanizing you because it shows what you were like before you solved the problem. And most of the time, in that part of telling the story, you're actually describing what your prospect, what your audience, what your customer, what the people who follow you, you're describing exactly what they went through. You're describing the exact challenges, problems, and pain points that they were experiencing at that part of a journey. Second one is to admit mistakes. Like, you are not perfect. And I got news for you. Your prospects, they suspect that you're not perfect. They might not have found the proof or the evidence yet that you're not perfect, but there's a self-evident knowledge that we all pretty much have that nobody's perfect, right? And so when you acknowledge your own past mistakes, again, what this shows is humility, and again, it makes you more relatable. As long as you could show them what you learned from the mistake and attach it to a positive outcome, right? Like if you're spending all your time telling people about all the times you screwed up in your life, but never talk about the lesson that you learned from it, that's not going to help anybody. It's certainly not going to help your self-image, and it's certainly not going to help the image that you want to project in the mind of your audience. But admitting mistakes is a way to humanize you because we all make mistakes. Next one is to use everyday language. This is such an important one. Like, avoid jargon and overly complex language. Now, in every market and niche and vertical and sector, there is certain terminology that people use. There are certain phrases that people use in these little tribes of the world, and it's important to know those words and use those words. But what you shouldn't do is try to articulate things in a way that make you feel like you're superior in terms of intelligence to your prospects. Like, you shouldn't try to impress them by using fancy words. And I'll tell you, I was guilty of this. So here I am actually admitting a mistake as it pertains to this. But like, I used to try to use big words and fancy sounding phrases in order to make myself sound smart in the mind of my prospect. But in reality, all I was doing was putting up a barrier between us and forming a disconnection. Remember something. The skill and the magic in communication is not taking something simple and making it sound complex. Anybody can do that. The magic is in taking the complex and simplifying it. And once I had that epiphany, not only did my communication become clearer and more effective, but I wound up getting more clients, more customers, more followers because I realized, man, my ability should be focusing on taking complex things and simplifying them so that anybody could understand them. Not taking simple things and trying to doctor them up and make them sound more complicated and fancy for the sake of trying to like increase the perceived value of them. So use everyday language. Next is be authentic. Like, just be yourself. Now, look, I always tell people, like, you got to find the perfect balance between your truly authentic self and your most influential self in this context. So what I mean by that is that obviously you project a different part of your personality at different times of your life depending on who you're with and the environment that you're in. And so you don't want to act the same way or speak the same way at a wedding that you do at a funeral. You don't want to carry yourself the same way you do at a football game as you do on a job interview, right? But that being said, there are parts of your personality that are uniquely ingrained in you. They're a part of who you are. And when you try to deviate from them and be someone else, so if you start like changing the way you talk, or you start changing your mannerisms, or you start changing your body language, your audience is going to pick up on that. They might not pick up on it consciously, but subconsciously, they're going to see there's a disconnect going on. This is often why sometimes when you communicate with somebody, you might say, man, there's just something about that guy I don't like. Something about that person rubs me the wrong way. Or there's something about that guy that I just can't figure out. And it's usually that. It's that they're deviating from who they are. They're not being authentic. Now, again, authentic doesn't mean that you have to like tell every little bit about yourself and act the same way in every single environment. What it means is that you need to identify like who you are as a core person, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, your core values, your virtues, your outlook on life as it pertains to certain things. And you need to stick to those things, because if you deviate from them, people are going to pick up on it. Next thing is to show empathy. So again, sharing a personal story, admitting mistakes, like showing vulnerability is great. But sometimes there are instances where you might not have made like a tragic mistake in your life or something like that, or you don't have this hero story to tell, or maybe your hero story isn't that dramatic. Like maybe you never were living on the streets, and maybe you never were on the brink of death, or maybe you never were 100 pounds overweight. And so you can't honestly tell that type of a story because you never were in that type of a position. But that doesn't mean that you can't still demonstrate understanding and empathy towards your audience's challenges and struggles. And so maybe the way that you do it is by saying like, look, I've worked with lots of people in the past and here's what I've discovered. And then you share with them the thoughts and feelings that you've discovered that your past clients have had. And then they start to say to themselves, well, those are the exact thoughts and feelings and emotions that I'm experiencing. And so that's how you become relatable, using empathy. Next one is to provide practical advice. I love this one. This is offer actionable tips and advice that your audience can easily implement. Like, to me, there's different levels of value as it pertains to sharing information or content with other people. And so there's lots of different ways to add value in terms of the content that you share. You could add value through the accuracy of your information, and obviously like your information should always be accurate. Like that kind of goes without say. That's a no-brainer, right? Like you should always be sharing accurate information. But sometimes it's the aggregation of the information that you share. So it's not just the accuracy, but it's the combination of things that you share from different aspects or contexts that make the information valuable. Sometimes it's the sequencing of the information. So sometimes it's the order in which you share the information that makes it valuable. And sometimes it's just the fact that what you tell them to do or how you present it is practical for them. Like there's no value in sharing content or insights or advice with people that is going to be too hard for them to implement, or that the average person is never going to follow through on. Because if they don't follow through on it, they're never going to see the result. And if they don't see the result, then they never got any value from what you shared with them. So it should be practical advice. Next is to engage with your audience through Q&A sessions, comments, social media. Like, don't just throw content out there and then disappear into the night. And again, I will admit, I was guilty of this in the past. I would put stuff up on YouTube and forget about it. Like I would post a video on YouTube and then, first of all, self-admittedly, I've been very inconsistent with YouTube, generally speaking. Like I've went on these paths where I was releasing videos once a week or twice a week and then go on a hiatus when I don't release them for 6 months, even a year. And so first of all, I wasn't being consistent, and I'm working on that now. I've built out a schedule, a content schedule, so that I stay more consistent with doing it. But even worse than that is like I would post a video and then I would disappear for a year, and in that year, dozens of comments would show up on the video, comments that people, had people asking questions, people giving feedback, people asking me if they could work with me, opportunities to open up opportunities to work with people and help them. And I missed all of it because I was too self-centered and too really lazy just to go back and see what people were saying. So if you're enjoying this video and you're getting value from it, or you have questions, leave a comment below so that I can respond to them. So engage with your audience. Next one is to highlight common ground. So emphasize shared values, experiences, and goals to create a sense of connection. So sometimes it's not the struggle that you went through or the upbringing that you had that makes them feel connected to you, but it's the fact that you both value similar things and you both have similar virtues in life. That's a very important thing that people want to be able to identify with. You know, I always tell people when it comes to their marketing, you should always be researching your prospects, knowing what their general beliefs and outlooks on the world are. Because let's say you are marketing to middle-aged, white, far-right, red, Trump-loving men. And in your marketing, you tell a story that positions Hillary Clinton as the hero of the story, and you talk about like her meteoric rise in the Senate or something like that. Well, what's going to happen is maybe you tell a true story. Maybe the story is relevant to your marketing and to the point that you're trying to make, but you just instantly created a barrier and a disconnect for your listener because they don't share the same opinion and values as the person whom you just made the hero of the story. And so just as important as highlighting common ground is to make sure that you avoid uncommon ground. Like if you know for a fact that there are beliefs and values that you have that may be different from certain pockets of your audience, don't bring those things up. Next one is humor. This one's risky, but the appropriate use of humor can make you more approachable and humanize you. Again, you just have to be careful with it because humor is subjective. But if you know your audience and they know, like, and trust you already, you can feel free. Again, just be yourself. If you're a naturally funny person or you naturally find humor in things, then use it. Next is be accessible. So make yourself accessible and available for consultations, discussions, and interactions. Show that you're approachable and willing to help. Like, again, don't be the all-knowing wizard on the mountain that nobody can ever get access to. Now, there's a caveat to that. You don't make yourself accessible all the time. And there should be levels of your accessibility because as you become less accessible, you also become more desired and more valuable. But those levels of accessibility should be clear. Like, if you leave me a comment on YouTube, I'll respond to it. If you DM me, I'll respond to it. If you want me to get on the phone with you and talk to you for 2 hours, okay, that's a different level of accessibility, and we could talk about how that would work. But the point is, make yourself accessible. Next is demonstrate continuous learning. So if you notice, the way I open up my videos is I say I'm a researcher in the field of human communication. Now, what does that imply? It implies a lot of different things. First of all, it could imply that I'm an expert. It could imply that I'm a guru without me coming right out and saying it. Hey, I'm an expert. You know, I've always found that to be like, I don't know. I've always found that to be kind of like, like when I see people position themselves as a master at something, I shouldn't say position. Position is the right word. You should be positioned as a master. You should be positioned as an expert. You should be positioned as an authority. It's when people self-label themselves as those things, that's what I find to be like, it's like this person's calling themselves an expert. It's always better if other people call you an expert or if you imply, like there's implied expertise there, right? Like Tony Robbins is an expert. He's the king of self-help, but he doesn't label himself the king of self-help, right? Doesn't label him. In fact, he made a Netflix special called I'm Not Your Guru, right? So implied guru status and implied master status and implied expert status, especially if it comes from other people, is so much more powerful than overtly claiming that you are a master or an expert at something. And listen, I'll be the first to admit it. I have played around with this in the past, in the past 12, 13 years in the self-help, in the self-publishing space, teaching people communication skills. I've wrestled with a lot of different titles that I want to use for myself. And so like I'm certainly not going to use an educated title like a PhD or something like that because I don't even have a college education, right? And so, but my learning never came from the classroom. I've always been the type of person that I learn really well by reading and doing. Like I can read books about things that other people have done and then execute on those things. And then I kind of take the life lessons that I've learned and I share them with people. That's my approach. I don't claim to be anything different than that. I am a researcher in the field of human communication. But what this also demonstrates is that I'm continuously learning and I'm on a journey of discovery with you, with the audience. I may know a little bit more because I've been studying it for the past 20 years, and pretty much the only jobs I've ever been able to hold are jobs that involve some level of communication with people before I opened up my own business. But what it demonstrates is that I'm right along on the path with you, which again creates that sense of relatability. Next is to give credit to others. So, one lesson that I learned is that lots of times, especially as content creators, authors, experts, thought leaders, I used to struggle with coming up with original content. And I used to say to myself, like, I would come up with, let's say, a framework for influencing people. And so, like, my main framework is called the A6 protocol. And it's these 6 invisible forces of influence that I have identified all good communicators have, and all poor communicators, they don't have these things. And so those 6 things are awareness, authenticity, authority, aptitude, articulative ability, and adaptability. And again, I have other videos where I explain what all those things are. But in coming up with those 6 things, like I would always say to myself, yeah, but this person talks about something similar to that, and this person talks about this, and I don't know if this is original enough. And so don't get me wrong, it's always good to be that way because you always want to make sure that you're not copying other people. But the reality is this: when you are a person who passes on intellectual property and knowledge to other people, there's always going to be a derivative. Like there's always going to be source content that you take from, that you derive from, and that you iterate on. Like that happens with everything. Like the world's most famous religions are iterations of other religions. One of the most popular philosophies in the world, Stoicism, is a derivative of cynicism. So usually what happens is a person finds a body of knowledge. They study that body of knowledge, and then as they study it and they apply what they learn, they gain new insights and new ways to maybe approach things, and then they come up with their own frameworks and their own approaches. And once I realized that this is like a very natural, normal part of life, it's just a normal process, especially that people that convey information to other people go through, everything became much easier for me. And so, but one thing I do is I always give credit to other people. Like I made a video recently about something I learned from a book called Key Person of Influence. As soon as I opened the video, I credited the author and the book because I want to be upfront and honest and say, look, this is an idea that I learned from this book. Now, here's my take on it. Here's what I learned from applying it. Here's what I think could be done differently, whatever it might be. Excuse me, but I always give credit to others. Next is to tailor your message. This involves customizing your communication to fit the needs and understanding level of your audience. So this shows that you're attentive to their specific context. So for example, when I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to younger kids ages 6 through 12, I realize that I have to teach that or explain that in a way that is different than the way I teach it to adults. And so I use a lot of metaphors and analogies and stories to help them understand what I'm talking about better. But this is a skill set that I learned is extremely important in just overall communication. So, not just being relatable in terms or in the context of being the all knowing expert or whatever you might want to call it. This is just an extremely valuable skill set to have in general when you communicate with people. When you communicate with people, you always want to try to customize the message in a way that the end user or listener sees the benefit to them. And so, again, anytime I explain a concept, if I'm in a room full of business owners and I'm explaining this stuff, I'm going to tailor the message to business owners. If I'm teaching storytelling to a room full of fitness enthusiasts and how they're going to grow their fitness business, I'm going to use specific examples and analogies and metaphors and stories that relate to business. Because what this does is it shows that you're attentive to their specific context. And relevance is very closely related to relatability. So the more relevant the message feels to the end listener, the more relatable you are to them. And then the last thing is to share behind the scenes stuff. So give insight to your work processes, your struggles, and your victories. This transparency can build a stronger connection with your audience. And really, this just demonstrates the fact that people love voyeurism. People love this idea of getting, of seeing you pull back the curtain and show them what's really going on. Show them like the behind the scenes stuff. Because they want to know, again, they want to know that you're a real person just like them, that you're in a real environment just like them, that maybe your thinking or your processes to come up with ideas are just like them. And so, again, taking them behind the scenes humanizes you. So there you go, guys. You got 14 ways to become more relatable when you communicate with people. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. Leave me a comment below so that I can actually respond to you and we can get a dialogue going. And if you enjoy this type of content, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you get updated when I release more videos like this.